what's up? My name is Leo, and I've just released my second ever Steam game. Blade of One is a tense 2D sword fighting game where you and your enemies die to a single hit. I wanted to commemorate the release of the game with this video, just like talking about what it took to get here, and hopefully it could be interesting or just like fun for you. Alright, so first let's jump in, like, why did I even make this game? Like, why Blade of One? Let's go back to like the beginning of 2024. I really wanted to make a game where melee was a central mechanic, not just like it was like an option you could do, and then you normally shoot a gun. I mean, like, really, like, you had to fight at close range. At this point, I have made some games with melee. One game that comes to mind was one I made for GMTK. It was Drawback Dungeon. You're a guy with a little sword. But it didn't quite scratch that itch. I really wanted to make a hard game that really felt like, you know, you really were fighting and with blocking and stuff. And I looked at games I liked, and one title in particular that really stuck out to me was Hotline Miami. The fact that, you know, every, you know, hit was lethal, I just found that really compelling. Like, I'm very much into those games where it's like you play over and over. They're really hard, but it's just so satisfying to, you know, eventually figure the thing out. And I wanted to recreate that experience. You know, eventually I got that chance. I joined this game jam. It was a week long, and the theme was one. And I thought, okay, one. You know, I threw some ideas around. I was like, okay, one hit, one kill. Let's do that. You know, it's finally my shot. At the start of the jam, I had already done a bunch of game jams prior, and I was thinking, like, okay, I'm working alone, and I should probably come up with an art style that, you know, is easy to draw, easy to edit, but, you know, make something new than what I've been doing, because I like to try new things. So I looked to like what could I do, and some things that stuck out to me was, like, I'd recently seen Nidhogg, also an inspiration for this because, you know, it's got cool sword play, and Colt Canyon, and both do a really great job with like a limited palette and very strong silhouettes, very clearly still pixel, but you can tell what stuff is. And I was like, yeah, maybe I could do, you know, something like that. We could do something like 1-bit-esque, you know, just like one color, another color, but maybe instead of just doing like black and white, we could do like some color and white, and maybe that color could change over time. You know, that wouldn't be too hard. You just, you know, let it change the background over time. You know, I could do something cool with that. In terms of the actual aesthetic, I figured, okay, it's a game where you could kill guys in one hit. They could kill you in one hit. And it's strictly melee, and I'm like, what better thing to do that than, you know, like swords? And I was thinking, like, okay, what media have I seen where like swords like kill that quick? And I was like, you know, it could do like, you know, something like Japan or like Samurai, and that got me thinking of my favorite stuff like that, like Samurai Jack. That's probably one of the biggest like influences on not only the Jam game but the Blade of One now. Just everything about Jack, just like how he's like one guy against the world. He follows the samurai code to a T. He learns to adapt. He's a master of his blade. And I was like, yeah, that's cool as hell. So let's do that. Probably the biggest impact that Samurai Jack made on this game was like that classic episode where Jack and the like ninja robot are fighting in the tower, and the sun is setting, and we get this really, really awesome fight where Jack's in the light, he contrasts against the dark, and you got the Shinobi robot, he's like contrasts against the light, and it's just this really beautiful thing with, you know, strong silhouettes, strong shape language, and that too was a really big impact on like how I decided to draw for the game. After an initial prototype of just getting a guy that could run around on some tiles, I started by building each level in order. So I started with level 1, then I went to level 2, and so on. And I like doing this for jam games because, you know, you start simple, you get things right in level 1, and then you move on, add some new stuff in level 2. What this allowed you to do was that by not planning out the entire game, you're not setting any like hard boundaries or hard goals on what you can do. with the strict deadline, you know, you weren't going to get to everything. You could just organically let the game get more complex to a point where it feels good. At worst, if you reach the end of the jam and some of the levels feel bad, or maybe like you didn't finish the last one you're working on, you can just cut it out, and it's no biggie. You still got like the rest of the game. I managed to make something that just barely worked. I had to patch it a bit after, but you know, I was happy. You know, Army of One, it was difficult, but it was very compelling, and it wasn't a game for everyone. I knew that at the gate making it. After that, I didn't really think much about the game. I was like, all right, cool. Like, that was a cool thing to do. What's the next thing? And I kind of just shelved it. Later down the line, though, my friend, he really liked the game. And I mean, he really liked the game. And he was asking me like, oh, you're gonna keep working on it? I was like, oh, am I? He was like, oh no, you need to add a bunch of stuff, bro. He really wanted archers, he wanted more levels, he was just like, he was hungry for more, and he was one of the only people that actually managed to beat Army of One, which is insanely hard for the average person. Like, looking back at it now, having finished Blade of One, it was stupidly hard and annoying. Like, the levels were just too long, unforgiving. At that point, the combat was also really way too simple and like a little more unfair for the player. But he got through despite all that, he got through it all. And he wanted more. And I think this is just like good advice for anyone that likes making games. When someone asks you for more, you might be onto something. I don't know. So with that, I pocketed that. I was like, yeah, maybe. And I was like, you know, couldn't be the worst idea. Then fast forward, it's like late 2024, fall. I just released my first Steam game, Space Defense, and that's like for a whole another video. After that, like once I was all well and good, I was like, damn, what's the next thing to do? What's the next big project? And you know, looking into my little box of random like prototypes and random things I've made, I was like, maybe I could, I found Army of One. I was like thinking about it. I was like, oh well, my friend still wants to play more. I was like, maybe this is my shot finally. Got winter break coming up. I probably wouldn't have gone back to it otherwise, but there was a demand now, and that gave me the drive to like, hey, let's work on it. So now that I had picked up the game and I was like, okay, now this I'm working on for real. Things had to get a little more serious. Because it's one hit, one kill, it has to be designed in a really particular way, especially now that I'm effectively taking something that was supposed to only be like 6 levels and adding who knows how many more. And how can I retain the original game's charm? Oh, like it's this simple. At this point, I had no idea what I was going to add other than like, a few tiny ideas I'd thrown around, but nothing concrete. So I decided to cement the philosophy. I was like, obviously, deaths have to be fair. The player, if they die, they should feel like, oh, okay, I just messed up. If at any point they're like, oh, this game's just really unfair and stupid, like more than like once or twice, then something's probably wrong, And especially in a game like this where one mistake and you got to restart a level, like, you can't be that mean. Levels shouldn't be too long or too confusing. Otherwise, the player, if they get turned around or they get killed and now they gotta restart that whole thing again, it's like very frustrating. And I don't want that because I've experienced that too. No jumping. So let me explain that a little more. I'm a big fan of movement, like games with movement. I love Team Fortress 2. I love Ultra Kill, jumping, dashing, sliding, whatever. It's awesome. But for this game, I wanted a departure from that. I was like, right off the bat, like no insane jumping, rolling, sliding tech. There were a few moments I faltered. I was like, damn, that'd be really cool. But I was like, no, stick to my guns. Keeping as much of the basic controls as possible. I toyed with the idea of maybe your guy has combos or he can attack, maybe there's different contextual slashes and stuff, or you gotta do some mid-hog, aim up or down to match the guy. And I was like, is that why people like the original game? And I figured no, the game was good because it was simple, because you were just focusing on, you and the other guy, or whoever's in front of you. That's what made it different than all these other things where you got, you're fighting 20 guys at the same time, running around on the walls and stuff. You treat your enemy with as much respect as any other enemy, because that could be the death of you. And I was like, I like that. That's why people like that. Gotta be careful, let's keep that. Now, with all the time in the world, I was free to add anything I wanted. I dumped a bunch of ideas into a Google Doc and got to work. My design process for Blade of One was simple. What's been done? How can something new fit in with what's already in the game? What could be funny? And what I mean by that is, what could challenge or surprise players? Then the last step, pull it back a bit. Usually the second step goes a little too far, maybe it's a little too crazy, so pull it back a little, try to figure out what's fair for players. There can be a little bit of back and forth before I settle on something that I think is both fair and interesting. I decided to tackle scrapped concepts from the Jam version first. The first new unit of Blade of One was the Archer. This one had been requested for a while from people, and I figured, it's a logical addition. Ranged units completely changed how I approach level design moving forward, and the Archer definitely, I think, makes the biggest splash out of all of them. To complement the slower defensive roster, I wanted to introduce a more aggressive, agile unit. With the game's roots, going back to like Revenge of Shinobi, the ninja was a no-brainer addition. Being a lot more speedy and dodging, which heavily contrasted the more like tanky, blocking enemies you found in Chapter 1. Enemies were not the only thing to evolve. Along with minor tweaks to improve the flow of combat, entirely new game objects and interactables could change entire chapters. Platforms, stairs, ropes, and doors allowed for much more interesting level design than just a long stretch of hills. In addition to more time for design, I could also spend more time on the visuals of the game. Empty paths were now carpeted in grass, rocks, and more. I also decided to add to the palette, and this allowed a lot more detail without straying too far from the original art style. And it allowed for so much like new stuff, mainly like complex buildings, dense forests, and much more. As the weeks went by, I worked on and off on the project, taking time to make engaging, detailed levels. With time, it had become clear that a simple player worked great in an ever-evolving environment. With only so many actions the player could do, it didn't take long to figure out how to tackle new enemies and obstacles. The simplicity was going to hold up. In June, I decided to get a demo ready for Steam Next Fest, and that was an awesome free chance for people to discover my game. And with a few more eyes on the project, this gave me some motivation to truck along with development. With the remaining jam ideas picked clean by the end of the second chapter, I started organizing ideas for new enemies and levels for the greater game. I wanted each chapter to feel more amazing than the last, while still retaining the philosophy of rules I'd established at the beginning of the project. With all this new stuff, and given the skill-based nature of the game, I knew feedback would be essential. I mean, it's easy to get biased when you make a game on your own, especially when it's intended to be difficult. And it really helps to know how players take your design choices. Everything sounds good on paper and in a vacuum, but once you give it to people, things could work out different. I decided to open and announce a small alpha playtest, and most of the players for that were just my friends and their friends, which was good enough for me. Feedback was mostly good. Not many people had specific issues with the game other than finding a few rogue bugs. And even with not much to change design-wise, it did give me a lot of confidence in my design philosophy, and I felt emboldened to try some new things or make things a little more difficult so players could have more fun. So yeah, in what felt like no time at all, I was back at school. I felt like that the game was nearing completion, and I was itching to get it released at this point. I had been working on it since, December of the previous year, so, a good few months there. I was aiming for September 1st, because, the first Blade of One, it felt right. Even with Silk Song coming out, just a few days later, I wasn't going to feel much pain as a unknown solo developer. And to my surprise, I actually was able to get up to 900 wishlists right before release, which far, far outperformed Space Defense, which is my first Steam release. I like to think it was a combination of, better marketing experience, maybe the genre of the game being, a difficult single-player game resonated with players more than a co-op game. And who knows, maybe being in a desert of Steam releases, I ended up getting more natural traffic than I would have had I released any other time. I don't know, I'm not a marketer, but at the end of the day, I was really excited. Once the weekend came, a few rough days to crunch, and I got version 1.0 uploaded to Steam at 5 a.m. on Monday. And I had class that day too at 9, so that was a little painful to get up for. 12 p.m. eventually rolls around, and I proceed to release the game in a Panda Express line. Okay, so I wanted to talk about what were some takeaways from this experience, because I imagine if you're watching this and maybe considering your own project, maybe what are some things I was thinking about after this. So I'm just gonna go down a list here. If you really enjoy playing your game, others may too, if you're having fun with it, you're a person, so there's gonna be others out there that also enjoy it. Design intentionally. What experience are you going for with your game? And by that I mean, is it specific? Should it be can you beat this particular boss or sequence or something? Or is it more open? Are you allowed to, collect stuff in any order or build things up? I think figuring out big picture things like that can help inform a lot of future design and leaves you open to new stuff in the future without making yourself too pigeonholed. What players want can surprise you. So it's important to consider all sorts of perspectives. And at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to, accommodate every single person. Even the best games ever have only 98% positive reviews on Steam because, some people just don't like things, and that's all right, you're making the game for the people that want to play it. Feedback exposes problems, not solutions. So players are really good at finding issues because, especially if you're working on something alone, you can't anticipate every single possible input and decision. Maybe just a sequence is just too hard to get through, and players tell you, this part's way too hard. And if you get that enough, then it's oh, maybe it's a problem. But it's up to you to choose how to solve it, because it's not as simple as just a player telling you, oh, delete this, and then you delete it. It could be, something else is an issue, or it just simply needs to be tweaked, or maybe even you just need to explain to the player better how to do something. And with that is how I made Blade of One from a jam game to a Steam release. Some of you have already been asking for more, and I definitely have some plans in store for content updates, maybe some challenge levels or cool little secrets and stuff. But yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching my first longish video. It's a bit of a mess, and some, half of it's unscripted, but I hope you found it interesting. Let me know how I did in the comments, and if you'd be interested in longer devlogs like this one in the future. Peace.